Hi, welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Just last week we did the story where Henry McLeish, the former disgraced First Minister, said that there weren't enough MSPs and that they needed to radically increase the numbers. And of course this will come at great cost. Now I thought it was just him sounding off, but it turns out that there's been an entire think tank about this. There's been a review within the Scottish Parliament. And they are coming out also and saying the same thing. Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser says there needs to be a lot more MSPs to make democracy more localised, fewer people per MSP, so therefore more discreet democracy. But he also says fewer ministers, because presumably there isn't really enough ministerial work to go round and be warranted. Now, of course, this will cost a lot more. You're going to have each new MSP will be having to be paid. Then there's expenses and travel. There probably isn't enough room for offices, so there may have to be an extension built and so on. And so the cost will spiral. It is just an absolute joke. And it just smacks of jobs for the boys, doesn't it? Let's get more of our chummies in. Now, the SNP will be right up for this, of course, because the more seats there are, the more seats they can win, or the possibility at least. And the more they have, then the more of the 15% of income that they'll get, thus increasing the wealth of the party and allowing them to continue. I think it needs to stop. It absolutely needs to stop. Anyway, we'll take a look at this, see why they're doing it, and if it can be stopped at all. Here it goes. Now, before we get into it, if you do like the output of the video, do please absolutely hit the thumbs up. And if you like the channel, do definitely subscribe. It helps us grow. And given what's been happening recently with YouTube and the problems we've had, it will be of immense value. It just resets the algorithm and it really does help. So let's have a look. Reforms to Holyrood, including reviewing the number of MSPs and ministers, have been proposed by a think tank. The report's author, Scottish Conservative MSP Murdo Fraser, said change is essential at the Scottish Parliament, which is said to be caught in a complex web of political polarisation and institutional stagnation. Is that because you've got the same old people being there for so long, no one is capable of coming up with new thought? If they truly want to change things, maybe have maximum term limits. It's an idea, isn't it? Absolutely. You get voted in 5 years for the first term and then 3 years for the second term. Something like that. But of course, you don't really have general elections. You just have it whenever any member's term is up. Bang. There's an election in that seat. So there's no real general election and you get an organic change. That's the way to do it. And it's, if someone has to resign or they're taken ill or die or something, they go boom and there's an election and that person who comes in starts at that point. That way you get this, over time you get this organic change, not a general election, so there's a constant flux, and thus more reflective of any particular point in time with how the public are feeling. And it also means that with a maximum of 2 terms, you can't have staleness. You can't, first of all, you can't make a career of it. You're in, you're out, and you're done. Go and get another job. So there's no point in making politics a career. And it also means that they're always having this fresh idea coming in. That's my proposal. Anyway, the paper, published by non-partisan think tank Reform Scotland, Mr. Fraser said there's an imbalance between the legislative and the executive branches of power in Scotland, and the quality of lawmaking leaves so much to be desired. I don't think the problem is between legislative and executive. It's the fact that the executive owns and has subsumed into it the judicial. When you've got the judiciary sitting at the cabinet table as part of the executive, that's the main problem in Scotland. Sort that out before you start working between the legislative and the executive. The report makes a number of recommendations, including reviewing the number of MSPs, currently 129, with the review considering the fact that the Scottish Parliament has more powers than it did when it was established in 1999, and work at committee and chamber level has increased. Oh bless, is it too much for you? perhaps you should consider leaving and finding a less stressful job. No? No, of course not. Most of you never find another job in your lives. You're useless. It also suggested the number of ministers should be regularly reviewed in proportion to the number of MSPs, with a view to introducing a cap if the number of ministers is above what the Parliament deems to be acceptable or necessary. 5 ministers. First Minister, then Finance, Home Policy, basically, their social and transport. Everything else, don't need a minister for. You can get away with some junior department head, subcommittee based. There's no reason for it. They're the big 4, aren't they? Maybe one for health. There you go, because you might need that. 5 ministers and a first minister. Get away with that. Little half dozen, a little kitchen cabinet. That's all you need. Everything else, it's not. There's nothing else that's so important that you need a minister for it. Anyway, Fraser said the Scottish Parliament was once seen as a beacon of democracy, but it now finds itself in a complex web of political polarisation and institutional stagnation, as we said. Despite the various achievements throughout the Scottish Parliament's first quarter of a century, it now stands at a crossroads, grappling with a crisis of confidence and effectiveness. It hasn't been effective for a long time. Ever since Sturgeon came, centralised powers, created a monolithic structure, and then filled it with hate. That's when it stopped being effective. Instead of working with each other to get things through, it was them and us show. And that has continued. It said reform is not only desirable, but essential if the institution wants to continue its promise to serve the people. The ambition to create a more European-style legislature which would encourage collaborative working and build consensus has not been fulfilled. And it won't be with the hate. The hate that Sturgeon built into everything. Because you couldn't just previously disagree. You could just disagree. But now you have to hate. That was Sturgeon's doing. And I don't think it'll ever change. And that's why those days is gone. The influence of party politics within committees has diluted their effectiveness, turning them into arenas for partisan debates, there we go, and exchanges rather than a place of constructive communication and consensus building. The checks and balances in the system have now been seen to show multiple flaws, especially in the formation and scrutiny of legislation, and that will continue. But the worst part, if you really want to fix anything, get the judiciary out of the executive. Fire Bain. Offer her the choice. She can be a parliamentary member, and stand for Parliament, whatever, and do that as a member of Cabinet, or she can run an independent head of judiciary. She'll take the independent head of judiciary, of course. More power. And then immediately make sure that there is a regular change. You put a case in there, maximum 5 years. And then change. And stop people making careers out of this. Make them serve because they want to, not because they can't do anything else. Coming up. Let me know in the comments about this. I'm going to put the proposal. Do we need more MSPs to reflect a smaller batch of people per MSP? So therefore, a more concentrated democracy, or should we have the same number of MSPs because they're all lazy sods who are just in it for whatever they can get, or should we have fewer MSPs, or should we have no MSPs in abandoned Parliament? It's an interesting bunch, isn't it? But let me know. It'd be interesting to see what the take on that one is. I just think if you're going to have something, you're about there at the moment. You don't need more because they're all parasites. What you do need is removal of the judiciary out of the executive, and you need, and I think this is very important, fixed term limits, and then you only do 2 and then you're out and you can't make a career out of it. Anyway, stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button. As I say, it's very, very important. Ring that bell as well so you don't miss, and hit the like button as well because that really helps the algorithm for this video. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I'll speak to you later. Bye.